Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's your host, Liz, and this is my podcast, the E-Reads Podcast, where I discuss books, authorship, and all the different parts of the creative process. Today, I'm speaking with Tim, who is an author and founder of Polytope Press, and we discuss the power of books, how books can teach us so many lessons, whether that's from healing, history, to even math. This is one you will not want to miss, so let's jump right into the episode and get to know Tim just a little bit better. Welcome, Tim. How are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm good, and I'm really excited to pick your brain about all things. But before I do that, I will start with what I call is a bookish question or a book-related question. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, so my question for you is, what is a book that you always recommend, right? Do you have one that kind of comes to mind as like your go-to recommendation?
I often do, and that is usually Suppressed Inventions and Other Discoveries by Jonathan Eisen. Last name is spelled Eisen.
Ooh, why that one?
I think it's one of the most important books ever written. I think most people have no idea what planet they're really living on, and it's only by reading a book like that, cover to cover, do you really have a sense of what planet you're living on.
Ooh, very cool, very cool. And tell us, because you write both fiction and nonfiction, there's an interesting theme there. But before you tell us about the themes and all of that, what got you started into writing? What made you say, like, this is what I want to do?
Honestly, it was something that I knew almost from birth. It was just very strange. Like, even
Wow.
when I was in first grade, I knew for sure that I wanted to write. I was carrying around notebooks. When I would go into thrift stores and I would see
Yeah.
notebooks, I would just get excited because I would just think about all the stories I could fill them with.
Oh, that's
So,
exciting.
and then when I was in school, I started writing. Now, of course, you can think that you could be a good writer, and then everyone else can say, no, no, I'm sorry, you don't really have the talent for that. But
Hmm.
as I did writing, I was winning awards left and right. And I thought, well, okay, this is something I love to
Really?
do, and this is something that I win awards for. So why in the world would I not do it?
Right. Oh, that's really interesting. And what was the first book that you put out?
That would be the first of a 20 novel saga. It's probably the largest saga in human history. I spent a lifetime developing that, and so that was the first one. But as far as the first one that was published or released, that was a fictional book called Death of the Innovator, and then the first nonfiction book after that was Natural Healing Self Empowerment.
Very cool. Like you are just out here like Alexander Hamilton just writing.
I am indeed.
And please tell us, you have a company called Polytope Press. Is that correct?
Correct.
Tell us about this.
Okay, so I had actually developed a three-dimensional periodic table of the elements, and I had shared that information with scientists around the world in 30 countries and got about 95% support, which shocked me because I was only hoping for about 40%, because usually when you
Mhm.
have something new and major, you don't get that much support. So it was really
Right.
surprising to get that much support. And then when I went to the science journals, they all slammed the door in my face and basically said, "You're not one of us. We don't care what you have to say." I was like,
Mm.
"Oh, okay." I was a little surprised by that. So then I started researching global corruption and I came across suppressed health information. And when I saw basically what was called suppression syndrome, where if you're not part of the club, you're not allowed to say anything, I said, "Okay,
Mm.
I'm going to have to start my own company then." So I'm not going to let the bad guys stop me. So
Right.
I founded the company and I published the information on the periodic table of the elements, which is free to the public. They can just go to the website and read it for themselves. And then I started publishing my fiction, saying the things that I wanted to be said. One of the things I'll tell you about the publishing industry that I started noticing, I had spent pretty much my entire childhood and teen years prepping to become a writer. And
Yeah.
then right when I got close to it in my early 20s, I found out that the entire publishing industry was, especially with fiction, driven almost purely by sensationalism. They were not
Mm.
interested in meaning or value or ideas or things that were going to make the world a better place.
Hmm.
Basically, pump up everybody's adrenaline and go home, and that's it. Don't teach people anything. Don't uh, make the world a better place. Don't do anything along those lines because basically you'll find giant red slashes through your writing for all that type of content. I
Mm.
could not stand for that. I was just like, that's the whole point of me writing in the first place. It's great if you can excite a reader. Sure, I love that. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, if the purpose of writing is not to build a better world, what am I doing this for? I have no interest in doing it if I can't make the world a better place.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I love that you were so true to like your mission. You know what I mean? I think it can be really easy, especially when you have a dream, to get lost and like I just want to achieve it. But then you just kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, feel kind of crummy because you lost yourself in the process. So I love that you were just like, no, like this is what I want, and I'm going to let that be my guiding star.
Exactly. Wizard of Oz. The when they wander off in the poppy fields, that's a
Mhm.
metaphor for the artist losing their way and just no longer following the dream.
Mm. Oh my God, that's interesting. And so, uh, what is your goal with both your nonfiction and your fiction? Tell us a little bit more about your stories.
It's about an optimal civilization. Everything that I do is related to an optimal civilization. So I've broken it down into four primary categories in the nonfiction section, which are health, fitness, science, and technology. So you're never going to have an ideal world if people aren't healthy. So I show you how
Hmm.
to do that. You're never going to have an ideal world if people aren't fit. So I show you how to do that.
Hmm.
You're never going to have an ideal world if people are not capable of doing math and science and understanding their world. And there's an educational section of the website devoted to that. And then
Oh,
finally,
cool.
the technology section is devoted to the goal of an independent homestead where people can be completely free of centralized power, which is the way I feel that life should be in an ideal world. We shouldn't be dependent on the government to just flip a switch and tell us whether or not we're going to have power or water or anything like that. We should have all
Mm.
of that be independent. And then the fictional parts of the website are pure inspiration, just showing you what that ideal world would be like and building up the fire to want to see it real.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like, okay, would you suggest people start with your nonfiction or your fiction books?
Honestly, I always recommend that people start with what they're most passionate about because the more passionate you are about something, the more likely you are to follow it through. But the
Mm.
website is set up in order. So if you just
Mm.
start from the mission statement and you just literally go down category by category, you will grow on a path if you want to do that. But not
Oh,
everyone
cool.
will want to do that. Some people are just like, well, I'm just in the mood for fiction right now, or I'm just in the
Hmm.
mood for art or history or whatever it may be. You can't go wrong. I mean, as long as you pick something that you truly enjoy, maybe check out some of the source material. I have a recommended reading list helping people to understand where I got a lot of some of my material from, which can be a big deal because a number of my ideas are somewhat exotic and people may wonder, where in the world is this guy getting this stuff from? So I have that recommended reading list to help orient you and make you feel comfortable with my background. And if you
Hmm.
follow along with that, I think you'll be okay.
Very cool. Kind of speaking of that, where does inspiration come? And is that the same or different for your fiction versus nonfiction? So, kind of, what sparks you to create?
Well, as I've said a few times along these lines when asked similar questions, when I was a kid, I was under the impression I was supposed to be living on paradise on earth. I really believe that. And then I was
Hmm.
like, why am I here?
Hmm.
So I was just so confused by why I was living in this world and not living in paradise.
Hmm.
And I was around some religious people, and they would tell me, okay, well, when you're dead, you can experience paradise. And then I would just have a bad reaction to that. I'd say, well, why can't I have it now? I mean, why do I have to wait till I'm dead? I mean, and I seriously wanted to know the answer to that question. I
Hmm.
was never getting a good answer. And I
Yeah.
would look at people and I would see that they weren't determined. They were a little on the lazy side. They didn't want to look things up. They didn't want to study how the things around them worked. And I
Hmm.
thought, well, I mean, we're not going to get there just by like wishing. I mean, you can try that. You can go sit by a wishing well and wish for everything you want to come true and see how well that works for you. But what I have found works extremely well, hard work. So I just keep studying and researching and training and experimenting. And after a lifetime, I have figured out how we can have paradise on earth if enough people want it. And I lay that path out at my website.
Oh, I love that. And I love how you mentioned, if I didn't mention it, how you can kind of like grow through the experience. I think that's such like a novel idea. Like again, like, because it seems like what you're creating is almost like for people who want an alternative. I don't know if alternative is right, but an alternative lifestyle or a more fuller lifestyle. And so I like that you kind of guide through people through making that change.
Right. I mean, for me, I would definitely not call it an alternative lifestyle. The lifestyle that is exemplified at my website is nature. I mean, it's the way that we
Mm,
should have been living the entire time. You know, like for example,
right.
with medicine, people will say, well, normal medicine is doping yourself with some crazy concoction that was whipped up in a lab. Well, I don't know how that ever got mainstream. I mean, that is an alternative to me. Nature
Mm-hmm.
is what made all of us, made it our
Mm-hmm.
entire species, made every animal species. That is the first way of living. And that's the way that I embrace, because throughout all of my writing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, you do get a very strong impression that nature was always on your side. And if you learn from her, you can have pretty much everything you want, including an optimal civilization, which I sometimes call paradise on earth.
I love that. I love that. And um, tell us about what makes, sometimes with nonfiction, um, it can get into the realm of like feeling like a lecture or a textbook. Sometimes it can go into the realm of um, being, we'll say, like user friendly or like easy to pick up. Kind of like what, how would you describe your nonfiction books? Or is it for a particular person? Is it for anyone?
I would definitely say it's for everyone. And the way to make it engaging is pretty simple. Actually, most of the time, I have the opposite problem, which is trying to calm the fiction down, 'cause or
Mm,
nonfiction down, because it's like an adrenaline rush. Like in Hidden
yeah.
History of Humanity, you start off with a tour of the solar system, you go to the origins of life, and then
Hmm.
you go to Atlantis, which was like the most advanced civilization ever on the planet. So
Hmm.
everything is just so exciting at the
Yeah.
very beginning. And even with nonfiction, there can be issues of pacing. Like people feel like there's too much adrenaline. Slow the story down for a little bit. So eventually, when I get to the recorded history that people are more familiar with Sumer and ancient Egypt, the story does start to slow down a little bit and people can feel more oriented. But I mean, we're talking about, again, the origins of the solar system, the origins
Mhm.
of life itself, the origins of humanity, and whether or not there can be paradise. I mean, I don't know how that could possibly be more interesting to anyone. And then with health, we're talking about the elimination of 99% of all disease on the planet. And
Mhm.
again, with that, it's kind of hard to make that boring, especially as you're going through the story and you hear all these strange success stories, people who have wiped out cancer, AIDS, heart disease, dementia. I mean, there's even a story in there about a guy who suffered 2 strokes. And the joke in the medical industry is 3 strokes and you're out. This guy gets on to natural foods and reversed partial paralysis. I mean,
Oh,
with
wow.
stories like that, how can things not be interesting? I don't know.
Oh, wow, that is interesting. I wanna go back, you talked about pacing, and that's something I didn't consider when thinking about the nonfiction realm.
Mhm.
How can one go about pacing when thinking about nonfiction, right? So, like, I'll keep it broad like that, like, any kind of guidance on thinking about pacing for nonfiction?
Well, just a moment.
Mhm,
One of the things I did was be thematic with the fiction. So, as I was mentioning before, when I told the history book, it wasn't just a story of sequential events, it was a story of optimal civilization versus negative civilization.
mhm,
So, for example, when the story was moving on into recorded history that people are more familiar with, for example, with Sumer, ancient Egypt, and Babylon, the story is getting very, very dark, and
mhm.
it's not getting that much fun to read. So it was actually at that specific point that I stopped the story for a second and said, "Let me explain to everyone exactly why everything that you're reading about is not necessary," and then I walk you through the 10 basics of civilization: water, sanitation, food, shelter, power, heating, cooling, lighting, telecommunication, transportation, and show you that everything that the people were being taught was wrong. So, I
Mm,
mean, that's an example right there of how you don't let the story become too depressing and
right.
dull. You just stop and say, hey, I mean, this is what went on, and this is why it was not necessary.
That is helpful, right? So that's helpful. So it makes me kind of think about I know the same way you would think about fiction, like kind of like being able to see how the reader is going to experience that, knowing when you need to pull back. having just like a nice hand of or just artistry.
You always have to be, well, I mean, you don't always have to be, but I think the best writing, you are aware of your audience. You care
Yeah.
about them, you understand. You're thinking about, I often use this expression. You have to walk the reader from where they are to where you want them to be. You can't just
Right.
assume that they're going to understand everything, or you can never say, you know what I mean. No, they don't
Hmm.
know what you mean. You're writing the book. They're at your mercy. I mean, you have to give the setting, you have to tell what time of day it is, you have to explain why a certain method wasn't used that the reader will say, "Well, why didn't they just do that?"
Hmm.
I mean, you always have to anticipate that if you want to be engaging to the reader, I think. So the more considerate you are of the background of a given reader, I think the more you'll draw them in and the greater the benefit they'll have.
And that, I can definitely hear the through line of creating that optimal society, and that just again, like just walking people through.
When you think about businesses like Allbirds or Skims that are selling through the roof, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But what's often overlooked is the business behind the business that makes it all possible. For millions of businesses, that's Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. With ShopPay, you can boost conversions by up to 50%, meaning fewer abandoned carts and way more sales. Whether your customers are scrolling online, strolling through your store, or browsing social media, Shopify ensures you're ready to sell wherever they are. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/DAX, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/DAX to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/DAX.
You've got questions? O'Reilly Auto Parts has answers. Need a pro you can trust? We've got that too. No matter what you need, our professional parts people have the training and expertise to help you do things right. Deep automotive knowledge, just one part that makes O'Reilly stand apart. The professional parts people.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Which is nice. I think sometimes when and talking about different things, again, for lack of a better word, people can get like preachy, but you're very much like, listen, I just want you to be okay and be able to have the best life and us to experience a better quality of life. And like, here's the information on how to do that.
One of the first short stories I ever wrote, and it was like it was foreshadowing, I guess, because I could sort of tell what kind of life was coming for me after everything that was going on. I was maybe about 17 years old, and it
Hmm.
was a story about an innovator and a town that turned against him and put him on trial. And
Mm.
uh, when the guy was under heavy fire, the judge looked at him and said, "You know, why are you doing what you're doing?" And his response is a response that's been with me like my entire life. And his response was, "I only wish to point out that there is a path. I have no desire to force others to walk it."
Wow. That's good. That's real good.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit more as we kind of wrap things up about your fiction books. You know, character, style, anything you want to share there about the fiction side of your writing.
Well, under the circumstances, I certainly have to talk about my most recent book that just got finished within the last few weeks. It's called The Math Wizard. It's available at my website, so I please urge people to visit. And it is, as extraordinary as this may sound, it is an attempt to resurrect the seven-stage path to enlightenment as taught in Atlantis. And although the story is fictional, the mathematics that are in the story are real. You go on a mathematical tour of the universe, takes you off from the origins of the universe itself to the mathematics of constructing rooftops and bridges, to microscopic life forms that most people don't even know exist, to the existence of the soul. So all of that is covered with links in there. It is an electronic book, but in this case, that makes it even better because it links in such a way that it feels like a movie as you're going through it. So this main character in the story
Yeah.
is a wizard who is being trained on the path to enlightenment to use his magic, which in the story is actually not traditional magic. It's what's called ether physics, to build structures like the Great Pyramids. He's being trained to build a Great Pyramid, and at the end of the story, he actually does build one of the Great Pyramids that's lost under the sea at the present time. But in any case, I just think by having the reader share this path to enlightenment along with the main character, you will go on one of the most amazing mathematical adventures you will have ever gone on in your life.
I have someone in mind for that would love this story, because I'm intrigued yet scared. Math scares me. Should I be scared? Is someone who's not great at math, can they pick this up? Tell me more.
Yes, you could definitely not. There's no reason to be afraid under these circumstances. The way that math is traditionally taught is somewhat alienating, and I actually address that openly in the foreword,
I
talking
love
about
that.
how I myself was kind
Hmm.
of alienated in
Yeah.
math. But when you see math taught this way, where
Mm.
there's a lot of tricks, there's a lot of things that are made incredibly simple for you that you had no idea things could ever be this simple, and you get a lot of video links that are showing you the math being applied and just like amazing things about math that you never knew before. It will truly invite you in and make you appreciate your life in ways that you never did.
I love that it's interactive, and I appreciate how your brain works and sees the world, and I'm glad that you have used that skill and turn it into literature. So well done.
Thank you.
Um, Tim, any last words for folks that are just like, I have an idea or a way of seeing the world, and I don't know if other people are going to get it. Any words of like encouraging them to tell their story?
Well, you do have to face a harsh reality at times when you're going about this. There's a lot of people out there who will want you to sell your soul, and if money is your sole object, you can do that. I know with Piers Anthony was an author that I tracked for a very long period of time, and at the beginning of his career, he wrote a major novel, Macroscope. It was a masterpiece of science fiction, and it took him tremendous effort. It's a spectacular accomplishment. But after he did that, he wrote a really shallow piece of fiction and it became an even greater bestseller. And then he looked at that and he said, wow, I guess I could just write shallow fiction and I could have bestsellers all the time. And so he chose to go down that road. The only thing that's unfortunate to me about making that career choice is you have to think about what you're in this for. I mean, maybe you are in this just to feed yourself. Maybe you're just in it just to feed your family. In my case, I have a story in me that, as Richard Bach would say, unless you're being dragged kicking and screaming across the floor to write something, you probably shouldn't be writing. I mean, there's tons of books that already exist, tons of stuff has been covered. You should try to have at least some care that you're saying something truly original that needs to be said. But if what's deep down inside you needs to be said, then say it one way or another. I said to a friend of mine in
Hmm.
college, I'm going to write what I'm going to write, even if I bury it in a drawer in my room and no
Yeah.
one ever reads it. And he looked at me like I was crazy. But that's, I think, sometimes the drive that you have to have because, maybe no one ever will read what you write. So do it for love. That's the primary thing. That and everything else that follows after that is going to be secondary. But do hone your writing craft to make your writing as effective as possible.
I love that. And again, where can folks find your writing? How can they connect with you?
At my website, which is Polytope Press. If you use the DuckDuckGo search engine and type in Polytope, Polytope, space press, my website will be the very first one that comes up. Please visit, take a look around, and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from people.
Tim, thank you so very much. Not just for your writing, but for wanting to leave this world a little better than you found it. I think that's such an awesome mission that you have.
Thank you for the opportunity. I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Be well.
You too.